Let's go back briefly to China. Newsweek is reporting that the CIA thinks China bullied the World Health Organization into delaying public warnings about the coronavirus early in the outbreak. And that was to give China time to buy up supplies of medical equipment around the world before everyone else latched onto the crisis. Now, that included buying up big here in Australia. Now, as I told you 6 weeks ago, a report by Chinese customs officials shows the astonishing results of that big buy-up. From January 24 to February 29, China's national customs inspected 2.4 billion pieces of protective equipment that have been sent to China by Chinese companies here, just from Australia, including 2 billion face masks. Joining me is the panel, Rita Panahi, Star Herald Sun columnist and Sky News host, and Daniel Wild, Director of Research at the Institute of Public Affairs. Rita, I don't know the truth of this particular latest claim that from the CIA report, because there's a lot of politics obviously involved here. But isn't this one more reason for this independent international inquiry that Australia wants into how this virus got out?
Oh, it's a no-brainer that we need one. Absolutely. I've never not heard one single argument against having an independent international inquiry into the origins of the virus and how it was handled initially. And certainly this particular report has got some fairly worrying insights into how China and the World Health Organization interact. And it makes sense because, as we know, as late as mid-January, the World Health Organization was telling the world that there's no evidence of human-to-human transmission. And many people, many experts suspect that China would have known by then that there was certainly human-to-human transmission. And Taiwan tried to warn the WHO about this risk as well in December, and they weren't heard because the WHO does not want to offend China, so they do not acknowledge Taiwan's existence and don't admit them to join the World Health Organization. So this entire catastrophe needs a full independent inquiry so we know precisely what's happened, and we can do better the next time a pandemic comes about, wherever its origins are.
Well, that's a critical issue because this is the second time that we've had a very scary and deadly virus escape from China. Daniel, but here we really do have, arguments on both sides, really. This dispute with China, on the one hand, I think it's clear that we deserve an independent inquiry into this virus, if only to save us from the next one. On the other hand, making China angry, as we hear from a number of premiers and apologists, could cost us billions and billions of dollars and thousands of jobs. So where do we strike the balance here?
Well, that is the question, Andrew, and I think it's instructive to actually compare how Australia and the West has engaged with China compared with the former Soviet Union, where much more economically and commercially and culturally enmeshed with China, much more interdependence than what was the case with the Soviet Union, as an example. Now, there has been significant benefits flowing from that, both to Australia and the West in terms of underpinning our economic development and growth, and also clearly to the Chinese people. Millions have been lifted out of poverty as a result of the opening up of the Chinese economy. But one of the challenges, Andrew, is really the Chinese Communist Party, such as it is today, is really in part a sort of Frankenstein creation of the West's willingness to engage and financially and economically underwrite that regime in a way that it did not with the Soviet Union. Of course, our confrontation with the Soviet Union was much more based on the military threat of the prospect of nuclear war, whereas with China, it's much more this kind of economic leverage game playing. We know they have the Belt and Road Initiative, which gives them infrastructure leverage in countries, the Made in China 2025, which is their strategy to integrate global supply chains of advanced manufacturing into China. And of course, the broader economic interdependence means they have a kind of economic political leverage that wasn't the case with the Soviet Union. So this is a monumental challenge, Andrew, and one of the solutions will be diversifying our exports to places like India and finding other alternative sources of investment into Australia.
Yeah, I think that's right. We all gambled on China with our help becoming more developed and therefore more liberal. That was it did exactly the opposite. Rita, where would you strike the balance? I understand, confronting China on this issue threatens a lot of exports and a lot of Australian jobs. On the other hand, we can't let this slide. Where is the balance?
Well, if we don't take a stand now, if we don't follow through now, we never will. There's not going to be another opportunity like this where much of the world would stand with us, even if they're not as public about demanding an independent inquiry. But there have been countries from Europe to Africa to the US, obviously, who have expressed their displeasure with China and their handling of this crisis. So this is the time to strike. Otherwise, we can just say that we are constantly going to kowtow to China because they're a major trading partner, because of their economic might. We are never going to take a stand and fight for what's right and what's in our long-term best interests.
I think you make a good point. You make a good point. If we won't stand up now when we've got a virus from China that's killed nearly 100 Australians and wrecked our economy, when will we stand up?
We've got African countries who are taking a stand. We've got France, we've got the US. We're not standing here alone, though China's having a tantrum and pretending like we're the only ones. We need to look at the bigger picture. That's what I said at the editorial. A lot of countries right now are in fierce debates with China, which is snatching parts of their territory.